Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War Battle Report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have 2018 Ogres versus 2019 Dwarves. This battle was fought at 2250 points, and the scenario was push. So starting out, why we're doing 2018 versus 2019, that is because I'm going to a Masters prep event next weekend in Tacoma, Washington, and since the Masters for 2019 or 2018 is running the 2018 Clash of Kings rule pack, obviously that's what we'll be running there. Since my opponent is not going to that event, he just wanted to mess around with this 2019 list because why would he play in the past? And yeah, that seemed fine to me and we went for it. So starting out, we have all three dwarf formations in this list. Starting with Gallic's Thunder, which involves Gallic's Fury and the two Steel Behemoths. They all gain +1 speed. Then we have Hernius' Hunting Party, which involves Hernius the Hunter and then 2 regiments of Rangers, who basically become the legendary unit Hernius' Rangers, which I'm sure most of you know that. And then lastly, we have the Wall of Iron, which is a horde of Bulwarkers who brought the Brew of Strength this time. 2 regiments of Ironclad, and a king with the Wings of Honey Maize. So this formation, I believe, gives all 4 of those units Iron Resolve. It at least gives all the not king. I think the king gets it as well, though. So they all have Iron Resolve. Then lastly, we have a Berserker Lord with the Blade of the Beast Slayer and also Mount. So yeah, this is a bit of a strange list, but my opponent really wanted to play Gallic's Thunder, the formation, and that's so expensive that it really limits your army. I said that if he was going to run Gallic's Thunder, he should probably run the Wall of Iron along with it, but he's fairly new to wargaming in general, although, you know, I've played him for since we were teenagers, but he took about a good 10-year break there, and now that he's come back, stuff like Ironclad, he's, you know, kind of lukewarm on it because they just don't do any damage, not realizing that it's not really about the damage, it's just about presence right on the table. And in this case, he brought the Wall of Iron, he brought the Gallic's Thunder, and then he brought Hernius' Hunting Party because it was already, I think it was like 11 at night when we got this game started, and I just wanted to get on the way. So that is his army. Next up, we have the Ogre list. I've played this many times. It's a variation on the Jesse Cornwell version. So we have a horde of Siege Breakers with the Potion of Caterpillar. Then we have a horde of Hunters with Brew of Strength, 2 hordes of Boomers, 2 troops of Red Goblin Scouts, 2 regiments of Chariots, a Warlord who is on Chariot with the Banner of the Griffin, 2 Army Standards, 1 with the Blade of Slashing, 1 with Diadem of Dragonkind, a Warlock with Aura of Heroism and Inspiring Talisman, 2 Boomer Sergeants, and lastly the Hell on Wheels formation, the pre-nerf version of Hell on Wheels. Yeah, I've played this list quite a few times. I think it's very good. It's unfortunate that the Hell on Wheels got the kind of nerf it got. I don't think it's bad, but I kind of look at it and go, yeah, but if the point is to make you play new and interesting units, I guess it makes a lot of sense because people ran the Hell on Wheels a lot last year, and now that's rotated out, so you will swap around. But if the point is to get people to play Chariots specifically, it was a bit of an overreach in my opinion. They don't need the +1 nerf, but they need more than just gaining Rally on the Warlord to bring 2 regiments of Chariots in my opinion. But anyway, moving forward. First off, we see deployment. So in push, what you get is each side gets D3 loot counters. You place them on any of your units at the beginning of the game, and they act like loot counters. So you can't be surged, you're immune to Wind Blast, you are speed 5 at most, and you can't fly. Excuse me. So at the end of deployment here, I'll actually go through the armies in a second, but I do have one of my loot counters here, which this unit right here is representing my Siege Breakers today, just because I have another unit of Siege Breakers, but I only have 4 models, and I haven't managed to multi-base them yet, or make any more, because boy are they intensive to, they're all green stuff and plastic card, and it's just a pain in the butt, so I haven't managed to do any of those. So it's these guys today as Siege Breakers. They have 1, and then I believe I put the second one on my Warlock, who is right there. So those are my 2 tokens, while my opponent has put 1 on his Bulwarker Horde right here, and another on 1 of the regiments of Rangers from the Hernius formation. As for the list themselves, let's go through them. Over here in the Lizardman pile, we have our first Steel Behemoth as a Headless Stegodon. Then we have some Ironbreaker, they're not Ironbreakers, Ironclad, which are these skinks. My opponent actually has enough dwarves to do this, but for some reason I think he thought he didn't have enough like dwarf models on him right then, and he didn't want to have like one unit be skinks and one unit not be skinks. So this makes sense to me. But that's Ironclad. And then we have the second Steel Behemoth. Then right here we have, again in the middle, that is this horde of Bulwarkers. This big dragon thing, that is the Gallic's Fury himself, itself. And then we have the second regiment of Ironclad. Oh, and actually I think, oh yeah, back here, just right back here, this little gray guy. That is his king with wings of honey maze. Over here we have our first regiment of Rangers, our second regiment of Rangers, and again these guys have the loot counter, and then Hernius himself sitting right there. And then back here, this random cold one, that is his Berserker Lord, his mounted Berserker Lord, since we haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do for that just yet in his army. So anyway, that's the dwarves. Moving on to the ogres, we have in the front, these are my these are my two boomer captains. Behind them, my first ASB, this guy with the flag, that is the Diadem Dragonkind. Then this guy right here, that is my Warlock. Behind them, the first troop of Red Goblin Scouts. And then right here, we have the first horde of Boomers. Then to in terms of picture, right, we have the second horde of Boomers, the horde of Hunters, the horde of Siegebreakers, and again, these Siegebreakers had the loot counter along with that Warlock. And finally, we have the second ASB, this is the Blade of Slashing, my Warlord on Chariot, and then the two hordes of Chariots with the last troop of Red Goblin Scouts making up the rear here. And those are the armies. So moving forward on to turn 1. So turn 1 goes to the ogres, and of course we take it, run forward as far as we can, or as far as we're willing. Not a lot to say here. This ogre army has very limited very short range shooting, so I wasn't really in range just yet, although I think that my boomer sergeants could get into range because he decided to vanguard forward with both the units of rangers. So they shoot off into the loot range. Oh wait, no, I think they actually fired at these rangers right here. And you can see, yeah, kind of what's going on here. Yeah, I shot into here, and it's 16 shots total, but they're on 5 pluses due to stealth and or cover. I do like 1 or 2 wounds, it's not a whole lot, but I don't get a waiver, and we move forward. So here is the end of turn 1 for the ogres. You can see our final placement. As for some slight comments, I decided to keep these chariots a little bit more varied. I moved my little Red Goblin Scouts forward because I was currently in range of both of these breath attacks, and I wanted to have cover for my Siegebreakers if he was going to shoot there, but I actually couldn't. I made a mistake here with the Hunters, thinking for whatever reason in my head, I was like, oh yeah, probably because he was after 11. I was like, oh yeah, Gallic has a breath attack, or at least he's range 12, right? Meaning that it's a 17 inch, but I'm well within his 18 inch range, well, assuming it's 23 plus his movement, his threat range. So I'm actually in range of all 3 of those with my Hunters, which is a small mistake, but that's what happens. This is why we played it. So moving on to turn 1 for the dwarves, you can see that their battle line just sort of advances forward a little bit, keeping again that dwarf line here. Off on the right, oh, I actually forgot to go through the terrain. So before I talk about that guy, let's talk about the terrain a little bit. So starting here on the right, we have a height flat piece of water feature. Then to the right of it, we have a height 1 obstacle. And then off here to the northwest, we have a height 6 forest. Then we have a height 2 hill right here with an adjunct height 1 obstacle next to it. In the center of the table, we have a height 4 building, and then over here another height 6 forest, and then to the northwest of that we have a height 2 hill, and to the north of that, a height flat water feature. So it's definitely it's not the most open table, which is honestly what I prefer. You know, adds a little bit more tactical maneuvering, but still pretty open in terms of the difficult terrain. Like, there's no difficult terrain in the middle line here, meaning that well, I guess I do have a decent amount of Pathfinder, but it's not going to come into that much, although my opponent does have this forest to hide in. He won the roll-off for side, so he chose this one, so he can get into this forest with his rangers. But anyway, back to the game. Off here on the right, we see his Berserker Lord getting ready to charge into my goblins or boomer sergeants or whatever gets near him. Just moving over there, while his rangers just sort of advance forward a little bit. I think the idea here is that they're just going to shoot into a boomer sergeant, hoping to take it off. Gallic positions himself in the middle, so or itself again, to have maximum line of sight for shooting. It's probably not going to get a charge just yet, because off here on the right are all my boomers, right? So I'm just going to shoot. I don't want to fight Gallic, and I'm just going to fight on the left until I can swing around. So it's probably just getting ready to shoot. While lastly, we have the Bulwarkers, and then the 2 Steel Behemoths and some Ironclad. And their idea is pretty good, which is they're just staggered. So you can see the Bulwarkers are in front of the Steel Behemoth, the Ironclad is in front of the Steel Behemoth, is in front of the Bulwarkers here, right? So the idea is that my larger Ogre units cannot combo charge any of these because we're too wide, which is a smart play. And he has, the only thing I can combo charge is, I believe, the Steel Behemoth, although the Ironclad might be farther forward. But anyway, this Steel Behemoth right here would be the only thing I can combo charge, and I would charge it over this barrier. And since I brought no Strider, because the Mammoth didn't have it yet, I can't really get anything into it just yet. So yeah, with his shooting, my opponent's shooting, both the Steel Behemoths and Gallic all fire into my hunters. They don't do too well at the beginning, which is what this 5 is, but unfortunately he fired Gallic last, and I think Gallic does 4 wounds itself, so pretty decent amount of damage, putting me, I believe, on 9. But over here, all the Rangers, I don't think they did that well, because they've got 24 attacks with the Rangers on 4s with Elite, so like, you know, like 13-ish hits, and then wounding me again on 4s, so getting 8 wounds along with Hernius there to help with his 3 plus 2 pluses. 8 is, I'll take 8, that's fine. And to add insult to injury, I believe he only, my opponent only wavers this Boomer Sergeant, so unfortunate. The one thing I did do with my last turn in terms of rolling dice was to cast Aura of Heroism onto this ASB with the diadem, which you can see this gold die at the very bottom of the picture. That is a 2, meaning that I have Rally 2 over here. So pretty good, at least my nerve is high. Yeah, you can see it ends up being 9 wounds after Gallic fires into me, which is unfortunate, but you know, at least my opponent does not roll, actually does roll a break on the first bit, but then on the reroll, only manages to roll like a 3 or something, so I'm not even wavered, which is very good, as I need this unit in the center to actually do something, and was just sort of a stupid mistake that I moved so far forward in the first place. But something to think about in the future. And this is the end of turn 1. The dwarves have advanced to keep their battle line, and the ogres are just sort of setting up in the midfield, hoping to take out these dwarves piecemeal, which might be hard as they are a tough nut to crack. Moving on to turn 2. So turn 2 sees the first charges of the game. On the left, you can see, I'm not sure about this rule either. I just sort of did it during the game, and I'll look it up after this report, which is, you know, great timing by me. But I take these Red Goblin Scouts and I just double pivot using Nimble and run away. But I feel if, even if I couldn't do that, if we roll a picture back, oh, you can see his Dwarven King has run in front of my my little scouts here just to block them up, and since I'm not a regiment, I can't get past him on a charge. So I think what I could do is nimble pivot like this, still staying an inch away, maybe? No, I don't think. Yeah, I would have to back up a little bit, nimble, and then go this way, and just, yeah, I don't think that would work. I think I'd have to go that way, right, and blog up all my chariots. But instead, we just double pivot, and that's what I'm not sure about, is whether each pivot has to be clear of the dwarf, or if just when I'm done pivoting, I have to be more than, or an inch or more away. So anyway, if you know, feel free to leave it in the comments. But I do that, I run them back off. I move one of my regiments of chariots just up to meet them, which isn't all that relevant, as the 16 inches is enough to get me to, I believe, even the steel behemoth, so it's pretty far. As for the charges, I decide to take one of my regiments of chariots and go into the steel behemoth. The idea here is that, one, I don't want it shooting any more breath attack at me right now, and two, I think my chariots can take that charge, right? Like, they are, with the with the warlord sitting there with the rally 2 going on, they are currently a 16-18, so I don't think the steel behemoth can drop me in one go. I mean, it could, is 20 plus d6 crush 3 attacks, but only on a 5+, so I think on average I'm fine. But I do want to limit that breath attack and limit its movement. As for some real charges, I take my very wounded hunters and one of the hordes of boomers and go into the ironclad here, hoping to kill them off. I think, pretty sure it'll be a trade, especially for these boomers, because I'm right in front of a steel behemoth and a horde of bulwarkers with crushing 1, along with Gallic itself. So yeah, I think I'll lose my boomers here, but I need to trade. I feel I need to trade because I want to get value out of my hunters, for one. I want to drop these ironclad, and I think the boomers are going to die anyway. So I might as well just throw them in with the hunters to make sure I finish the job, as Iron Resolve bulwarkers aren't something to mess with. In the middle, I send my siege breakers to go fight that dwarven lord who decided to mess around with my fearless goblins. Hopefully they should be they can do it. They've got 18 attacks on 3s and 2s, so I'm not too worried about it, but still. And I move my ASB here just to get some inspiring onto these 2 units, just in case. Over on the right, I get some charges going on and some movement. Unfortunately, these goblins, I wanted to charge this unit of rangers, but with the way that the movement was going to work, where I wanted my units to end up and how much cover I wanted to grant any of these units, I decided I had to go into the bulwarkers instead and maybe mess with Gallic a little bit. Probably not, but I'll at least block up these ironclad, because I need them not engaged in this combat. While my other units move forward, my 2 little well, my ASB and then one of my boomer sergeants walk to be 50% in this height flat piece of terrain. They are only height 2, so they still it still grants them cover versus the ranger shooting, and they are now within 12 inches of these rangers. While my boomers move forward to get within 12 inches of this unit of rangers while staying out of 10 inches of these. They are within 10 inches of the bulwarkers, but they are blocked up by my scouts, and they are out of 10 inches of Gallic. So the idea is just to rain a bunch of pain down into these rangers and hopefully drop them this turn. I think I end up scooching this warlock a bit more to its right here, just to make sure that I can get my little lightning bolt line of sight here. Since they have, stealthy anyway, it doesn't really matter for the cover. Lastly, my little wounded guy just wanders into the pond to contemplate his fate. But I didn't really measure it for this Berserker Lord. I think I forgot about him because it's just a random gray model on the table. So yeah, I'm probably in range of that charge. Not the best move. But anyway, with the shooting, it's pretty abysmal. I think I do 7 wounds with my, let's see, that's 32 shots on, well, 35 shots on 5s and 3s, and I do 7 wounds. Yeah, not the best rolling, but it's not that bad. I just was expecting more, I guess, in my head. But I do 7 wounds, I do not get a waiver, and we move forward to the combats. So You can see at the end of combat, I forgot to take pictures of me engaging all these units, but the red goblins, not only do they not waver or kill this unit, they just don't even hit it. 0 hits out of 7 on a, I was on a 5+ because I was hindered due to charging through the pond. But yep, 0 wounds there. While in the center, you can see that my hunters and the boomers have dealt with that ironclad unit. I backed up with the hunters a little bit just to make it so they were guarded from this steel behemoth, while my boomers just sort of stay in place. He does have a flank charge with the bulwarkers if he wants it, which spells doom for me, but I'm not too worried about it, as I think the bulwarkers plus a steel behemoth will kill me anyway, and all that really does is free this steel behemoth to shoot into an ASB or something with its breath attack, which again, I'm not too afraid of. But yep, my siege breakers do kill that dwarf lord and just pivot a little bit to face towards the center. Unfortunately, my hunters only fell back, I think they only fell back 1 inch or something like that, but which made it so they couldn't actually fall back out of range of this this guy here, which I wish I could have, but I can't. And lastly, we have the the point of that is that my siege breakers just rotated into them because I think I'm gonna lose my hunters right here, because my chariots actually do pretty well here. They're charging over an obstacle, so they are 4s and 4s, I believe, because crush 1 and they still have 1 level of thunderous. And I do 5 or 6 wounds to the steel behemoth, so pretty good, but not enough to get a waiver. And we move on to turn 2 for the dwarves. Lots of charges again. So my opponent does take this steel behemoth that was in front of my chariots here and charges into the hunters, looking to finish them off. Not the worst idea, although I do have ensnare. And then he takes the other steel behemoth plus his bulwarkers and goes to kill off these sacrificial boomers. So they're probably not long for the world. The ironclad laugh and charge into my goblins, looking to kill them. And after some deliberation, my opponent thought maybe he was within 10 inches with his rangers onto my boomers, but he is not, just barely. While he is within 10 inches of my boomer sergeant and maybe my ASB as well, but decides at the end of the day it's not worth charging them because it would get him into range of these boomers who he's probably better off just shooting into right now, looking to remove them rather than charge into a bunch of heroes, and I agree with that. But the one charge he does get over here on the right is that the little berserker lord, yeah, he's easily in range of charging this this boomer sergeant who already has 8 wounds on him, so that's not a great move. And we see Gallic. I think Gallic sits still. I don't think he moved at all, just getting ready to shoot without penalty. So here's the charges. Yeah, this guy goes in here. That's probably not great. You see the ironclad going into my red goblins, and the bulwarkers looking to snuff out some boomers, and looking to finally finish off these hunters with 9 wounds. And here's the end of shooting, where my opponent takes Gallic's Fury, the 2 units of rangers and Hernias, fires all of that into my boomers, and only does 10 wounds. So I feel pretty fortunate on that, because Gallic alone has 15 attacks on 4s and 2s. And then, well, so you've got 15 attacks on 4s and 2s, you've got 3 attacks on 3s and 2s, and then you have 24 attacks on 4s and 4s with elite. So yeah, I'll take 10 wounds, that's fine. And not only does he only do 10 wounds, he does not even waver the boomers, so they are fully operational next turn, which is great for the ogres, bad for the dwarves. And here is the end of the turn, so end of combat. You can see that down here on the right, there is a missing little boomer sergeant who has been killed off by that berserker lord. And in the center, you can see the boomers follow suit and get wiped out. But I do see a bit of ray of sunshine here, which is that my hunters took 0 wounds, and that is because my opponent rolls in with that steel behemoth, has 26 attacks on 6s, hits with 1, and then rolls a 1 to wound. So if they had a gun, they could still shoot it, which is pretty funny. Probably not funny for him, because now I have a front charge with the hunters if I want, I could corkscrew around to charge other units, but I definitely have a flank charge with some chariots, which is very bad for a steel behemoth. So we'll see what happens with turn 3. So turn 3 ogres looks like this. You can see I don't go for the corkscrew. I do go for the double charge. So I charge in with my hunters first. They center onto the steel behemoth. Then I go for the flank charge with my chariots. So ending up a little bit farther to the north here. I take my siege breakers and go into the bulwarkers, along with my clan, or what is he, ogre warlord on chariot, and my ASB with the blade of slashing. My idea here is that, like, oh yeah, I can pop through these bulwarkers right now, but that was not the smartest plan, just because the math isn't that great. I forgot about how much Thunderous I have on these units, because the Warlord has Thunderous 2, and then the Siegebreakers have Thunderous 1, meaning that when I go into these Bulwarkers, they have Phalanx, so I'm not going to be wounding on 2s, I'm going to be wounding on 3s and 4s, which is not quite good enough, and I think in the end I probably should have just backed off, maybe gone in with the ASB just to keep them occupied, and repositioned my siege breakers around, especially as there might be a bit of a flank problem here. But anyway, other movement, you can see my goblins finally get out of the way, and the chariots move to just get a flank down the center of the table, so they can support any combat that I need them to. My red goblins, yeah, they took versus the Ironclad, they took 1 wound, and my opponent failed to break or waver them, so they go back in. They no longer have spears, but you know, they'll do it. As for the combats down here in the south, I did have a charge, I believe, with my Warlock onto his Berserker Lord, but I only have 2 attacks. I hit on a 4 normally, I'd be charging into terrain, so 2 attacks on 5s and 3s, not good enough. So instead I just back up with the Warlock to be hidden from this character killer because of the edge of my boomers, and just sit there with my loot right behind him, so not in range of Gallic. My boomers don't move at all because they're already out of range again of Gallic and the Rangers, so I don't, like, it's a pretty perfect spot. I can't move anymore, but that's the idea. And I decide to take my Boomer Sergeant and back up a little bit, so I'm out of 10 of these Rangers, but I'm still within 12 for the shooting, while my ASB just throws caution to the wind and stays in range of both Rangers, because I feel like I can probably drop one of the Ranger units this turn. I have the same number of shots on them. Well, not quite. I'm -3 lightning bolt, but who cares? So on average, I think I've got it. And we move on to, yep, just showing off this combat. It looks like it took 4 wounds before from the chariot, so yeah, still pretty good. This one, not so sure. That is a risky charge, especially with that flank from a steel behemoth. Never do that. Yeah, I don't really care about that. And here is the shooting. So all in all, I do pretty abysmally with my shooting again. I don't think I even waver this Ranger unit, which I shoot at again. I'm not sure how many wounds I did, but we'll see soon enough, I guess. But I do end up getting down here on these boomers right here. I end up getting Aura of Heroism. I get only 1, but still it's better than nothing. I think my opponent is already incentivized to shoot at these boomers as they have 10 wounds, but I want to make sure that if he decides to split his shots, I'll still have Aura going on. Or if he decides that this Berserker Lord can just get into combat with them and finish him off, I will have the Aura for the shooting phase. So that's the plan. And oh no, I did. Okay, yeah. So I do end up deleting these Rangers. I do roll pretty poorly on the hit and the wound, but I end up rolling very well on my break test and just obliterate them. So yeah, a bit of a misfire in my brain there, but I did get rid of the Rangers. They dropped the loot next to Hernius, who cannot have it but can guard it. So he's just chilling with it. And yeah, we move on to well, what you can see of the combat, which is over here on the far left. I've killed one of the steel behemoths with the hunters plus the chariot charge, but the one in the middle went about as well as I thought it would after it already declared all the charges, which is I get in here and I'm like, right, they have phalanx, what a bad idea. And I do 10, 12 wounds, something like that, not terribly well. And that is a big no-no because now this steel behemoth has a flank charge onto my siege breakers, which is bad because I'm going to lose a 250 or 270 point unit of siege breakers that I need to kill steel behemoths, but also because they're one of my loot token bearers, so about to lose that one too. But at least I have, nope, I don't have any of his loot, so bad all around. Moving on to turn 3 for the dwarves, you can see, oh, and I forgot to mention this, yes, I did 2 wounds to the ironclad with my red goblins here, but since they have iron resolve, it goes back down to 1, because I do not waver them, obviously. So yeah, in the dwarf combat, he decides that, my opponent decides that a steel behemoth to the flank is probably enough to kill off the siege breakers, since I don't have big shield to the flank either. And the horde of bulwarkers just go into my ASB with the Blade of Slashing, hoping to pop out 2 of these units at once at least. Lastly, the warlord just bumps back a little bit because these guys ended up on an exact line since the bulwarkers charged. For my opponent's shooting, so again, he could have taken these rangers and gone into my ASB. But yeah, he decides against that, mostly because Hernius here, plus Gallic, they don't really want to shoot at these boomers who are almost dead. I think that they would prefer to shoot into this warlord right here with Rally 2, and they can both see him due to me being height 3, right? So the rangers just sitting here is probably a better bet because they can't charge into me to just shoot into the boomers and have Hernius and or Gallic there for support in case they don't roll that well. But he does have one other charge, which is the Grey Wonder goes into my ASB's butt. Granted, I didn't, he's an individual, so he's not trebling those attacks, but Berserker Lord already has 8, so I'm not sure he needs it. I guess he's charging through the swamp, so that's not great. And yeah, that's just dumb. Dumb by me, but happened. And this one, not so sure. I think my opponent probably has it. I mean, he's got 30 attacks on 4s and 4s. So he probably's got this one, but, it's not really that important to me. And this one, yeah, super not important to me. Kill the goblins, I don't care. The boomers are about to die anyway, so who are they protecting? And yep, last combat right there. So here is the end of shooting. I believe Hernius does have to help out the rangers, and when they shoot into my boomers, they get them to double 1 town and remove them pretty easily, while Gallic has other things to do and decides to shoot into my warlord and does 5 wounds to him. So I'm not sure if that's good or bad, as I don't have cover. What is that? I guess that's about average. He hits about 7 to 8 times and wounds me on 3s. So 5 wounds, pretty good. So yep, but thankfully for me, I'm not wavered or killed. He actually does roll boxcars, which I think does kill me on the first roll. No, maybe I'm a 16-18. So he does not roll boxcars here. But I thought for a second there maybe he'd killed me on the first roll, but thankfully not. And here is the end of the round, which you can see on the left that my my siege breakers are gone. This little buddy has the loot, so he's got a steel behemoth with a loot token on it. That's not great for me. But thankfully, he also only does 5 wounds to this ASB, even with the whole horde of bulwarkers, and doesn't get the waver there, so that is very lucky. And last bit of luck, my ASB also survives this charge from the Berserker Lord, who only hits 1 time and gets 1 wound, so not enough. And the Goblin versus Ironclad battle continues, being completely useless because they do 0 wounds to me this round, so I have outwounded them with my Goblins, winning. Moving on to turn 4. So turn 4, a bit more charging for the Ogres, obviously. So off here on the left, you can see that both of my regiments of chariots are now in on the Steel Behemoth, hoping to wipe it out. Unfortunately, we both went over this this little wall because the Steel Behemoth is split right down the middle of this wall, where it would, even if it were standing upright. So everyone's losing one level of Thunderous, everyone's hitting off 4 there. Not exactly assured. But I do have a corkscrew charge that I can do into, whoop, that's a 4, into these bulwarkers, hoping to kill them off right now. So I go in with these guys to replace the siege breakers, and I again take my Lord and the ASB in. The ASB didn't lose Thunderous, but it doesn't matter because he has Phalanx. So, meh. The goblins that could go back into the Ironclad, hoping to finish them off this time with their mighty one wound so far, and my other goblins just move to back them up when that inevitably fails. I do decide to countercharge into his Berserker Lord with my ASB, partly because I could only reach the Rangers with my charge. I couldn't quite reach Hernius, so there's no reason to charge over there, as I mean, I guess maybe I might have wanted to charge over here, but I just didn't want the Berserker Lord to leave my side of the table just yet, as it didn't really matter to me. These red goblins, by the way, are I think they're blocking the this guy from being, yeah, he can't charge into my Warlock because he would, he could only, well, he can't even go corner to corner because this is a 50 and these are 40s. So they're also blocking that from happening because he can see them with this little sliver, but can't land. With my shooting, I'm down to the one Boomer Sergeant who can shoot into these guys along with a lightning bolt if I want. So yeah, not looking the best, but yeah, showing off that combat. This one, you can see the, yeah, look at this totally preferred model count, 2 out of 6. That is because these guys are very metal models, and I have them on regiments because they were part of my previous army where I ran a bunch of Berserkers. And unfortunately, that makes it so they don't like terrain too much, so they're just going to be sitting on a proxy base pretty much the whole game. And yep, hoping to finish these guys off finally. I mean, I've been fighting them for 2 turns with a troop of goblins. Yeah, this is showing off the shooting. I do put a couple of wounds, I think, onto these rangers, but not enough to do anything, so nah, about what I expected. And here is the end of combat. Unfortunately, I don't kill off this Steel Behemoth. I don't even get close. I think I did single digits wounds to him, so like 8 or 9 maybe. But even with Brutal, I don't manage to kill him. I do manage to waver him, so that's pretty good, but he is headstrong, so eh. But the big combat went my way, which is all I really need, which is, so the Bulwarkers are gone, which is great for the Ogres, obviously. So, looking to reform, and all I do is reform these 2 units like this into an Angry Face. Let's get that, yeah, Angry Face. So I do that because my Warlord has picked up the token, backed off an inch, and then I don't want Gallic to be able to charge me, so block that right up. This guy might have been able to charge me, but I think he's just at a 14 of me. So, or 14? 16? 16? I think? I can't remember. Whatever his charge distance is, he's just out of it. And yeah, speaking of this combat here, my little ASB that could does 2 wounds to his dwarf, but he's a dash, I think like 16 or 17, something like that. So not even a roll. And we move on to turn 4 for the dwarves. So turn 4 dwarves, there are a few more charges. We see that the Berserker Lord goes back into my ASB. The Hernius's Rangers, or I guess just Rangers with Hernius around, decide enough is enough with these stupid goblins and just go to finish the job, as they actually again did 1 wound to the Ironclad, but Iron Resolve triggered, so they healed it. But the Rangers go into the flank, the Ironclad go into the front, looking to finish them off. Gallic just turns to shoot at whatever. He can shoot at my Hunters, which is a great target, or he can shoot at my, really any of these units are wounded, so any of them will do, but the Hunters are probably the best one. And lastly, we have, yep, Steel Behemoth. It's got that 3+ headstrong and passes it, goes into my far unit of chariots, looking to kill them off as they are out of the 6-inch Inspire bubble and of course the rally bubble because of that. So they're on their own. That's unfortunate. Yep, showing off this combat. I'm not too keen on this, as this is now a counter charge instead of just a regular charge. So 8 attacks on 3s and 2s, I want to say, with Blade of the Beastling. Not looking hot. This is a bit of a throw up. Again, he's got 20 plus d6 attacks, but he only hits on a 5+, so, you know, Steel Behemoths are just really swingy. And this one, yeah, those goblins are dead. Or likely dead. And yeah, with my opponent's shooting, Gallic goes into my hunters, which is a great pick. Does 6 wounds to them, puts them on, what is that? That's 15 wounds? Yeah, so 15 wounds. They are currently a 17-19, so he's looking for a 4 to kill them. And poof, gets them. So hunters are gone. That's a good roll for my opponent. I mean, not necessarily a difficult one, but a good one. The goblins are finally out as well, so that's going well. But down here in the south, we see this little Berserker Lord goes into my ASB, does 4 wounds to me only, and he does manage to waver him, so that's really good. But, you know, no kill, so I'll take it. You can see the loot counter has moved, and that is because these guys picked it up, I believe, in the previous turn, just by being within range of it. And we move on to, oh no, we have one last thing, which is the chariots got charged by the Steel Behemoth. It does 6 wounds to them, and because it's still 2018, they are a 14-16 in the formation instead of a 13-15, and they weather that charge just barely. So not even wavered, ready to rock. Moving on to turn 5. So turn 5, all the charges, all day. I need to make sure that this loot counter is gone off of these rangers, so I go for a flank charge with my Boomer Sergeant. He's charging through the pawn there, so hitting on a 5+, but I've got 8 attacks and I want to sink at least 1 to get Brutal to trigger. Then I send these goblins in the front. They've got 7 attacks on 4s and 3s due to Thunder 1, so it's pretty good. I send my chariots here into Gallic, 1 to turn off its gun, and 2 to block Gallic from being able to see my warlord, who is now skating right on by with a loot counter. And I send my ASB into the Ironclad, again to trap the Ironclad here. I don't think the ASB can do anything to them, but I just want them stuck. My Warlock just sort of sits here, wishing he was Nomar Garrosh. Well, I guess 2018, so wouldn't be the good Nomar, meaning I can't heal. But yeah, just getting ready to help out somehow. And lastly, we have these chariots going for a countercharge onto the Steel Behemoth, hoping to finish the job, although that's unlikely. Oh, and this ASB just bounces out of the woods, just to block line of sight for this guy to be able to see my Warlock behind this little house. So that's the whole plan there. And moving on to the combats themselves. Yeah, so in combat here, I think 1 or 2 hits onto the dwarves with my Boomer Sergeant, and thankfully I do get the wounds there, so they're gonna be triggered on that Brutal. I guess they might have triggered Brutal anyway, but and the goblins actually go to Champion Town and just wreck these guys. They were already sitting on 4 wounds, it looks like, in the background, and I do a further 6 or 7 wounds, and with Brutal, that is enough to pop right through them. And I pick up the token with my Boomer Sergeant at the end of the day, because he's slightly tougher than the troop of dogs, because the Boomer Sergeant, I believe, is an 11-13 with Def 4, while the dogs are a 9-11 with Def 4. In retrospect, maybe I should have picked it up with the dogs anyway, because if he kills the dogs, the Boomer Sergeant then has a chance to get the token back, while the dogs, nah, they're less likely to get it back, let's say. So anyway, that's what I did. In the combat here, I do nothing. So moving on. Versus Gallic's Fury here, I do 1 or 2 wounds. I do enough to knock off the breath attack, which is what I want, but obviously not enough to get past that -20. So moving forward over here, it's already, so this thing's already at 9 wounds, right? So I'm charging in here. I only have Crush 1, but I am hitting on 3s with 12 attacks, and I do 4 wounds. I do pretty well, but not well enough to kill it at that 18-20, although I do get a waiver. And again, it's headstrong, so, you know, 66% chance that it'll shake that right off, but still, waiver's a waiver. And here is the end of the turn for the ogres. You can see, yeah, I did some wounds to Golic, I'm not sure how many, but not that many. You can see I literally did nothing to the Ironclad. They are ready to murder my ASB here. While, yeah, the dogs, I move forward with the Boomer Sergeant, and just to get out of range of the little Blade of the Beast Slayer guy that's down here, but didn't actually make it far enough with my advance because I only go like 2, and the dogs can't really advance or do anything then. They could have backed up, but not necessary, especially as the Ironclad could then see them, so I don't do that. And oh, you can see with shooting I did get Rally 2 onto these chariots. Now this guy is providing Rally 2 to both the chariots right now along with my Warlock, but I wanted to get, well, one, I couldn't cast anything else, but I also want to get Rally here just because if he does the combats in the wrong order, or he double ones it or whatever, I do have Rally 2 onto my ASB here, who's only fighting Ironclad, so might be worth it. And moving on to Dwarf turn 5, you can see the charges. The Blade of the Beast Slayer does go into my Boomer Sergeant with a loot token, while the Ironclad go into my ASB. Golic's Fury goes into my completely unwounded Chariot Regiment, and I believe this Steel Behemoth actually fails its headstrong check, so cannot countercharge. So that is good news for me, as I've finally cleared this this wall. So it'll just be a straight up chariot charge, and I have a flank from this this guy as well, so I can scoot him a little bit farther out the board and away from Golic. So that's the plan. And in the combat here, oh, Hernius also charged in, just to make sure this is done, as he does have Crush 1. So yeah, Hernius plus the Blade of the Beast Slayer guy managed to one-shot my Boomer Sergeant, which is unfortunate, and then he just drops the loot counter behind to be stared at, I guess. In this combat, yeah, I think they kill my ASB here. Yeah, in fact, I'm sure of it. They do 4 or 5 wounds and just blow right through him, so yeah, my opponent was pretty down on Ironclad because, you know, they're only 12 attacks on a 4+ with no crushing, but I mean, they're not expensive, and they're Def 5 with Iron Resolve and pretty high nerve. Yeah, I think they're really good. But anyway, Golic's Fury. We're gonna have to see the end round shot for that. I know he does a lot of damage, but yeah, because in fact this entire game my opponent has rolled 5 or 6 for all of his randoms, which granted is d6 plus 25 or 20, so it's not that big of a deal, but all these guys have been really pumping out the attacks. And yeah, you can see he does, I'm not sure exactly how much damage, it's like 9 or 10 or something like that, maybe even more, and gets the waiver, thankfully, only the waiver, onto my chariots. So they can't charge, but they are blocking up Golic right now, while, yeah, the rest of the units go the way I thought they would. And we move on to turn 6. So turn 6, currently the loot counters are, there is 1 loot counter on the Steel Behemoth, the wounded Steel Behemoth there. There's 1 loot counter on my General. There is 1 loot counter on, not my General, my Warlord. There's 1 loot counter on my, let's just get the arrows back. So 1 loot counter down here on this Warlock, and then there's 1 loot counter under this Dinosaur. So that's all the loot. Let's see if we can get it. So I decided to move forward with my ASB. I couldn't, I definitely could charge. I think I just moved forward because Diadem is more likely to kill off that guy than charging into him with my 3 attacks and charging through the swamp, so I'd be on a 4+ to hit. So that's the idea there. The goblins go into Hernius, hoping to mess him up. I just sit here with my chariots. My opponent looks like he forgot to move Golic back a little bit, but yeah, I just sit there. My Warlock gets ready to shoot at Golic with a lightning bolt. It's unlikely to do anything, but every wound counts. Maybe later in the game I'll need it. And I go for this double charge, 1 in the front and 1 in the side. Actually, it looks like I am slightly on this barrier, so yeah, only a 4+ to hit, 4+ to wound from the chariots. So at the end there, I decide that I'll probably need the Warlord to finish it off. Also, I'd prefer him to be over here rather than anywhere near Gallic. So, yep, going for that. I can get a bit of cover from this hill, and or this hill. And that's that. So moving on to combats, I do a wound, I think, to Hernius, but nothing serious, and he's able to just shrug it off with my... Oop, I forgot to talk about the shooting. So yeah, this ASB does shoot into this little dinosaur. I probably should have brought my Warlock behind this hill, or this house, over to the other side of the house and shot at the dinosaur as well, maybe? But I don't, so... yeah, my ASB does 2 wounds, I think, to this guy, but I think it's a -17, and that's only 4 wounds, so no roll there. I fire a lightning bolt into Gallic and do nothing, or maybe I do wound, it doesn't really matter. Yep, and again, like I said, I don't do anything to Hernius here. Maybe a wound, maybe 0 wounds. It's not that big of a deal, as these Ironclad are just staring at my side, so... Ooh. And right here, yep, so I get into this this guy, and thankfully I did send the Warlord because the chariots do not roll very well, and don't manage to, I think they don't even manage to sink a wound against him, but the Warlord does 5 or 6 wounds, puts him at double 1 down, and we'll see what happens, I guess. Yeah, we'll have to see about that. Yeah, you can see here I did 2 wounds with the shooting, and yeah, this is, I'm sure you all saw it coming, I double 1 it. So, yeah, this is terrible. Again, the problem with this double 1 isn't that the unit's still here, isn't that it still has loot, it's that it can now charge me. Because if we roll some pictures back, actually, if we roll a picture forward, yeah, this is better. I don't know why I went backwards. But if we roll pictures forward, you can see right here, Gallic cannot charge me, right? He cannot make it over here because my chariots are still in the way. So the only thing he can do is shoot at me. I have 5 wounds on me, so, you know, Gallic might be able to do it. And it looks like I did do 2 wounds to Hernius, so the only shooting he has is with Gallic. So Gallic could do some wounds to me, but he'll have to roll it, right? Well, not anymore, because the Steel Behemoth here, I double 1'd it, which means it's fully capable of activating, and it can just charge into me and grab my loot counter and go for a last turn win. So, and Gallic gets to shoot into my Warlock here. If he kills that off, I'll have no loot, right? And, you know, I'll go from being at 4 points to my opponent's 1 point to suddenly 0 points to my opponent's 2, which would be very unfortunate. Mostly because, again, of a double 1, and not because the double 1 keeps him on the board, it's because the double 1 lets him charge. It's a bad rule. And moving on to Dwarf turn 6. So Dwarf turn 6, I think with his, yeah, so the Stegodon here, or the Steel Behemoth, goes into my Warlord, getting ready to finish him off, while the chariots just go like, oh no, oh no. My other chariots just sort of sit here, again, because Gallic decides there's no reason to charge them. It is better to shoot at my Wizard. But down here in the south, we can see both the individuals go into my ASB. I think that's a rather smart idea because the goblins can't grab the treasure. Oh, no, it's because the Ironclad went into the goblins, of course. So the Ironclad go into the goblins, looking to finally finish off a goblin unit, while the other two dwarves go into my little ogre character. Oh, look at this guy's face. Yeah, yeah, so they go into my ASB looking to finish it off. It has 5 wounds. I'm not sure it's gonna live. Yep, just showing off this combat. That one and this one. That 2 is actually for Hernius, not for me. And here is the end of shooting, which is Gallic goes into my Warlock, does 6 wounds, which I do have cover, so let's see, that's 15 attacks on 5s. Doing 6 wounds, quite a feat. You know, 5s and 2s, so pretty good, but not enough to kill me off, mostly due to Rally here, as I think he does kill me on the first roll, and Rally saves me from even being wavered, so at least I've got that going for me. And at the end of combat, here it is. So my opponent has 2 loot counters on the Steel Behemoth now because he gained 1 from my Warlord, while I have 1 loot counter on my Warlock And yeah, these two murder machines kill off my ASB, and there's one, you know, unaccounted for loot counter right there. So my opponent rolls up because he is the second player, and rolls a 6, so we end up playing a turn 7. Turn 7, pretty good for me because, you know, I went from, well, I just got a draw in a game where, you know, I was winning pretty hard, to maybe I just lose. So I go here, I end up with the loot counter. Not sure that's right. I think it just got moved there because these individuals can be on top of it and contest it, I believe. But anyway, it doesn't really matter as I've got all these guys staring at me, and the goblins also already have 3 wounds on them, so these little murder bots should probably be able to finish them off. My chariots just decide to go to Gallic's Fury and go into the flank of the Ironclad, and this was I did talk to my opponent during this, and I'm like, yeah, they should definitely have gone into Gallic's Fury. The only reason I'm doing this is because it's more fun. I mean, these guys killed off my goblins, and I had told my opponent that they are unable... Oh no, they hadn't killed off my goblins. Yeah, see? My goblins took 3 wounds. So they're not even wavered. Yeah, I went, let's just put them out of their misery and go into them with my chariots. Were this a tournament, I might do it anyway. I do stuff like that, but were I making the smart choice, I would just go into Gallic's Fury because these guys are irrelevant with my goblins here, right? So my goblins are already blocking them from being able to get to the loot counter, so I'm not afraid of it. And the only thing that's really a problem is Gallic's Fury getting ready to shoot. So yeah, and lastly we have my chariots going into the very, very wounded Steel Behemoth at the top, but again, I'm charging... nope, it looks like I finally cleared the barrier. Yeah, because he charged into because of his counter charge, I finally cleared the barrier without touching it. So, yes, I'm gonna hit on a 3. And we move on to combat. So, I've got 24 attacks on 3s and 2s into the Ironclad here because I have not lost any of my Thunderous this round. Pretty easily work right through them. And here in this combat, yeah, it's got 20 wounds on it. And I think I only sink 1, but 1's all you need when it's an 1820 unit, and I do not double one it a second time, managed to kill that off. So my chariot's doing work this turn, both of them killing them. Oh, and my warlock here just ran right past Gallic, so he'll have to turn and shoot if he wants to shoot at me, or I guess back up and shoot because my chariots are right there. But yeah, that is the end of turn 7 for the ogres. Currently, I have 2 loot counters on these chariots with 6 wounds on them due to killing the Steel Behemoth, and I have 1 loot counter on my warlock, who's right there, and then there is 1 loot counter unaccounted for. It is possible for my opponent to get a tie still, but it's very unlikely. And we move on to turn 7, and I believe this is the end of the pictures because my opponent just backs up. He does go into me with this with the Grey Wonder Berserker Lord into the side of my goblins, looking to kill them off. Hernius, when he swings around over here, has just the smallest line of sight because I'm height 3 onto these guys. So the idea here is that Hernius can kill these guys, right? They are a 14-16, meaning even if he only does 1 wound, right, that's still a 9 to kill once because I'm not inspired, while Gallic backs up to shoot at my warlock. It doesn't look like he can shoot at him, but I think we just, you know, place the model back a little bit. It's possible, but because I measured it during my turn. But yeah, it just backs up a little bit, and if he nails both these shots, it is GG, no re, and we will get a draw. My opponent has no faith in Hernius, hates the guy because Hernius doesn't roll that well when he's shooting, I guess. And he picks up his dice, rolls them, and it's 1-1-1. So Hernius misses all of his shots, and that is the game. We decide to, I just let my opponent double one these goblins, and he doesn't double one it, so he kills them off as well. But at the end of the game, so these guys are gone. But this is what the end of the game looks like. The dwarves just have Gallic's Fury, the Berserker Lord and Hernius on the table, so only his characters are left, while I have the 2 regiments of Chariots and my Warlock left. Thankfully, I have loot on those units, so I've got 1 and 2, 3 pieces of loot, all 3 of which are across the center line, so I've got 6 VP to my opponent's 0. So it is a win for the Ogres, but a very, very bloody, very sanguine game there. So yeah, good game. I hope you guys are around for the next one, and until then, bye.